Hi, this is Bill Quinn. We wanted to take a few minutes and do a debrief on the elections that occurred last night that so many are questioning, and it reminds one of the questions in past years about how could these things have happened. And so we're going to focus on some feedback from several folks that we know that we find accurate and insightful in looking at some of these things. So let's start with this. We want to make sure we remember the 5th of November and question those things that need to be questioned based on what we've now seen. So let's go here first. So Peter Berniger, a friend of CDM in the show, brought out some very interesting points. He starts with last night, there were 125,000 early mail-in votes for Democratic governor candidate Spanberger. This morning, there were over 300,000 early mail-in votes for her. And he lists the source that you can go interrogate to take a look for yourself. And then he calls out, let's take a look at the Virginia Attorney General race. Mayeres, the Republican, versus Jones, the Democrat, for AG in Virginia. Republican Mayeres lost right at the time inside the green box. And he points out the image below. We're going to show that to you zoomed up in just a moment. And then, the GOP, the RNC Research Organization, RNC Vote Protect, just keep pretending there's no election fraud. They're not screaming and yelling and investigating all this. And by the way, it's how you stay in power, isn't it? Well, let's take a look for a moment at what Mr. Berniger is pointing out here. Here is the list of votes. It's a way of looking at the votes as they're cumulatively tabulated. And you can see that Mayeres was in the lead. That's the red line at the top. And so it was above the blue line for Jones for most of the race, up until that last 10 or 15%. And all of a sudden, they switch. What does that remind you of? This looks very similar, if we recall, to that time when a number of states stopped counting. And then when they came back, all of a sudden, the dynamic between Trump and Biden in several states switched, just like very similar to what you see here. And Biden all of a sudden accumulated a whole lot more votes. How could that be? And you'll recall that this happened in Georgia, I believe Wisconsin, Arizona, and others. And in fact, the counting went on for quite some number of days before we had a final count in which supposedly Biden had won the election. Well, since then, we've been told by Tulsi Gabbard and others that findings have shown that the machines can be tampered with. And they have open doors, if you will, that allow folks to go in and change data that is supposed to be not changeable. I suspect we're going to learn more about how this happens. But keep in mind, too, that Fulton County and others have been hiding their ballots, their physical ballots. And one wonders why that is. Matter of fact, we're going to see somebody call them out on that in just a moment. Emerald Robinson also brought out some very interesting thoughts. She jumped right to the chase and said the elections yesterday were rigged. Just look at the vote shift in the Mayeres-Jones race, same thing we just showed you, and exactly the same as the 2020 election. It's the numbers are different, but the dynamic is much the same, and that's why I think what she's pointing out. Liz Harrington, one of the folks that we have learned to really watch and who shares insight that is very helpful as we go through this. Why spend 5 years and millions of dollars to prevent voters from looking at 148,000 ballots you insist are perfectly fine? Guess who she's talking to? She's talking to Fulton County here in Georgia. The question answers itself. If we finally see the ballots, and I believe, by the way, we will, The world will see the 2020 election results were a fabrication. And others in past days and weeks have said simply by getting a look at the actual ballots for Maricopa and Fulton would shed incredible light on the 2020 elections. Is that true? Well, a number of people are saying it, so we wonder if it's in any way untrue. Elon Musk called out something very interesting. He notes that the New York City ballot had some very strange abnormalities. One, there's no ID required to cast a vote. That's a problem, of course. But in addition, the ballot itself listed one candidate twice and put the Republican candidate way down at the bottom. Let's take a look. So the gentleman, if we're going to use that term, who won, Mr. Zohran, was listed actually twice. Did that help him gather more votes, perhaps? We don't know. And then look at Andrew Cuomo. He's down there at the bottom, sandwiched between two other candidates. Why would they pick that particular way of listing these? Why would Zohran get two ballot choices? Just astounding. And we'll see something about their victory celebration in just a couple of minutes that I think you'll find interesting. Leading report brought out this that was reported by Scott Pressler, but also many others. The election machines had at one point gone down in multiple locations across Cumberland County, New Jersey. Does that have significance? Well, if you remember back in 2022, I believe it was, a number of the machines failed in various precincts in Maricopa County and perhaps other counties in Arizona. And it was later theorized that why would these have failed? Well, there was talk about inappropriate paper or inappropriate ballots, or in some places they simply ran out of ballots to put in machines and so forth. Just a cross smattering, if you will, of issues that should not have happened but did happen. And here we see it happening again. We may hear more about election machine failures as we get further into this. We're still only hours after the election as we sit here. Here in Georgia, we also had two very notable upsets. Incumbents in the Public Service Commission races that are Republican were unseated by Democrats, and they're calling it in an upset. Again, how would this happen? How could this possibly be? What are the odds of upsetting two incumbents in this particular cycle? And especially given something I'm going to show you, and it goes back again to something that Liz Harrington pointed out, that really should be a bellwether, a litmus test for public opinion. So Liz Harrington here calls out that Democrats, the Democratic Party, has been floundering in terms of public opinion for quite some time. And she gives a number of cases where you can see that. Bear with me for just a moment. So, for example, look, CNN reports Democratic Party's favorability drops to a record low. Democrats get lowest rating from voters in 35 years, according to the Wall Street Journal. And there you can see a graph where they've been tracking Democratic Party favorability. And it too has been dropping. So match that to all these upsets that happened overnight with Democratic candidates, and then paste on the fact that a couple of the races, perhaps more than a couple, demonstrate very odd anomalies, like that crossover pattern of vote preference, of the ratios, if you will. Same thing we saw here in Georgia, same thing we saw in many states back in 2020. Very, very concerning trends. And the question becomes, how long are people going to let this go before they really put their foot down and say, okay, fine, we see there's something dramatically wrong and something must be done? Are we there yet, or are we still moving in that direction? We don't know, but it feels like something has to get there in order for us to get back to a valid, trustable election outcome, really in any of the elections. Then, to put a very interesting capper on the evening, Trump brought out a post late last night that said this: "And so it begins." Makes me want to ask, and so what begins, Mr. President? Well, again, we don't know, but Trump has been putting out some very interesting posts, as we've discussed in previous shows, in the last several months, but especially in these last couple of weeks. So we'll see what may come of this. We'll show you something else that he said when he was speaking with a group of business people down in Miami during a presentation there today. And bear with me for just a moment. We'll go ahead and bring that up now.
People, many of you are not from Miami, but that's okay too. And I'm thrilled to be back in magnificent Florida, Miami, Florida, with thousands of incredible business leaders and true American patriots. That's what you are. We're gathered today on the one-year anniversary of the single most consequential election victory, they say. This is them, this isn't me. I'm a very modest person, I would never say this. The single most consequential election victory in American history. It's possible. I mean, it's possible. We've done a lot. On November 5th, 2024, the American people reclaimed our government. We restored our sovereignty. We lost a little bit of sovereignty last night in New York, but we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. We rescued.
We'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. I wonder what that means. So one other thing that we found very interesting during the celebration party at the Zohran campaign, I think it's the campaign headquarters or wherever they were planning their celebration, something very interesting came up on their screen during their celebration. Let's take a look. Trump is your president. Huh. Fascinating. How did that get up there? Well, again, one of the other ones we don't know yet. All right. Well, thank you for listening. We hope this begins to put a little set of facts around the elections. We're going to have a lot more to talk about, I'm sure, in the coming days, and we appreciate you being here. Thanks very much.